The topic of Ibrahim Traoré and Kamala Harris. Why their 2025 visions for Africa collide presents a fascinating juxtaposition of two distinct approaches to Africa's future, reflecting broader tensions between global partnerships and regional sovereignty. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the interim president of Burkina Faso, has emerged as a polarizing yet charismatic figure advocating for African self-determination, while U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, assuming her role extends into 2025 for the sake of this analysis, represents a U.S.-centric vision of partnership and economic collaboration with African nations. Their contrasting visions, Traoré's rooted in Pan-Africanist, anti-imperialist reforms and Harris's grounded in strengthening U.S.-Africa ties, highlight a critical ideological divide. This analysis explores their respective approaches, drawing on diplomatic speeches, policy initiatives, and reactions on X, while addressing the role of misinformation, such as AI-generated content, in shaping public perceptions. Below, we delve into their visions, compare their approaches, and analyze the broader implications for Africa's geopolitical landscape in 2025. Ibrahim Traoré's vision, Pan-Africanism and sovereignty. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, at 37, is one of the world's youngest heads of state, having seized power in Burkina Faso through a military coup in September 2022. His leadership is often compared to that of Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader from 1983 to 1987, whose Marxist and Pan-Africanist ideals continue to inspire anti-imperialist movements across the continent. Traoré's vision for Africa in 2025 centers on achieving political, economic, and cultural sovereignty, rejecting Western influence, and fostering regional unity through initiatives like the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. Core elements of Traoré's vision: anti-imperialist stance and rejection of Western influence. Traoré has consistently framed Western powers, particularly France, as exploitative forces that perpetuate Africa's underdevelopment. In a July 2023 speech at the Russia-Africa Summit, he urged African leaders to stop behaving like puppets who dance every time the imperialists pull the strings, a statement that resonated widely among African youth disillusioned with post-colonial arrangements. His expulsion of French troops and diplomats from Burkina Faso in 2023, coupled with the termination of security cooperation with France, signaled a bold pivot away from traditional Western alliances. Instead, Traoré has forged partnerships with Russia, Turkey, and Iran, viewing them as win-win relationships that respect Burkina Faso's sovereignty. Economic nationalism and resource control. Burkina Faso's economy heavily relies on gold, which accounts for over 80% of its exports. Traoré's administration has prioritized nationalizing the mining sector to ensure that resource wealth benefits Burkinabe citizens rather than foreign corporations. In April 2025, his government granted an industrial mining license to the Russian company Nordgold, projected to contribute significantly to the state budget. Additionally, reforms to the mining code have enabled artisanal miners to sell directly to the treasury, bolstering plans for a national gold reserve. Traoré has also criticized the CFA franc, a currency pegged to the euro and controlled by France, as a tool of economic subjugation, advocating for a gold-backed currency for the AES. Alliance of Sahel States, AES. Traoré played a pivotal role in forming the AES with Mali and Niger in September 2023, aiming to enhance regional security and economic cooperation. The AES represents a rejection of Western-backed regional bodies like the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, which Traoré and his allies view as complicit in perpetuating neo-colonial structures. At the AES's first summit in July 2024, Traoré emphasized unity, stating, "We are not going to tremble, we are going to face up to it," highlighting the alliance's commitment to collective resilience against external pressures. Cultural renaissance and national pride. Traoré's vision extends beyond economics and security to cultural revitalization. He has called for the institutionalization of national languages and the reaffirmation of African values like solidarity and mutual aid. In a speech to cultural stakeholders, he declared, "Culture occupies an important place in our fight for sovereignty," emphasizing the need to reclaim indigenous traditions eroded by colonialism. This cultural focus aligns with his broader goal of fostering national pride and unity in the face of jihadist insurgencies and external threats, security and civilian military cooperation. Facing a decade-long jihadist insurgency that controls nearly 40% of Burkina Faso's territory, Traoré has prioritized internal resilience over foreign military aid. His Volunteers for the Defense of the Fatherland, VDF, program encourages civilian participation in national defense, framing security as a collective responsibility. Victory will not come only from arms, he stated, it will come from unity. However, his administration's crackdowns on dissent, including the detention of journalists and critics, have drawn accusations of authoritarianism. Traoré's popularity and challenge Traoré's anti-imperialist rhetoric and bold reforms have made him a symbol of resistance across Africa, particularly among young people frustrated by decades of foreign exploitation. His appearance at the January 2025 inauguration of Ghanaian President John Mahama, where he received a standing ovation, underscored his continental appeal. Social media platforms like X have amplified his image, with users hailing him as Africa's Messiah and the new Sankara. However, this popularity is partly fueled by misinformation, including AI-generated videos and deepfakes that glorify his leadership, such as fabricated clips of global music stars singing his praises. Despite his appeal, Traoré faces significant challenges. The jihadist insurgency remains a persistent threat, with major attacks in 2024 killing over 100 soldiers. His government's restrictions on press freedom and dissent, including the detention of journalists under emergency decrees, have raised concerns about democratic backsliding. Moreover, allegations of coup plots, such as one reportedly originating in Ivory Coast in April 2025, highlight the fragility of his regime. Critics argue that his pivot to Russia and other non-Western allies risks replacing one form of dependency with another, as Russian mining concessions suggest a trade-off for security support. Kamala Harris's vision. U.S.-Africa Partnership's Kamala Harris's approach to Africa in 2025 builds on her 2023 visit to Ghana, Tanzania, and Zambia, where she emphasized collaboration, economic investment, and cultural exchange as pillars of U.S.-Africa relations. Her vision reflects the Biden administration's broader strategy to counterbalance the growing influence of China and Russia on the continent while promoting democracy, trade, and security cooperation. Assuming Harris remains vice president or assumes a higher role in 2025, her agenda would likely continue to prioritize strategic partnerships, leveraging initiatives like the Prosper Africa Initiative and the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. Core elements of Harris's vision: economic collaboration and investment. During her 2023 Africa tour, Harris announced $100 million in aid to Ghana and 4 other West African countries to address violent extremism and instability. She emphasized the Prosper Africa Initiative, launched in 2019, to boost two-way trade and investment. In 2025, Harris would likely advocate for codifying this initiative into law to ensure its longevity and push for the reauthorization of AGOA and the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, DFC, to enhance U.S. economic engagement. Her speeches highlight Africa's investment potential in sectors like culture, music, and technology, aiming to create shared prosperity through partnerships with African entrepreneurs and the diaspora. Security cooperation. Harris's vision includes strengthening U.S. security partnerships to combat terrorism and instability in the Sahel and other regions. Her 2023 discussions with Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo addressed concerns about Russian private military contractors, such as the Wagner Group, in West Africa. In 2025, she would likely continue to promote U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM. Initiatives, such as joint training programs and counterterrorism operations, while framing these as mutually beneficial rather than imposing Western agendas. Cultural and digital engagement. Harris's 2023 visit included stops at cultural sites like Ghana's Cape Coast Castle and engagements with young African artists and tech entrepreneurs. She highlighted the importance of African culture and digital innovation, aligning with President Biden's 2022 executive order supporting creative industries. In 2025, Harris might prioritize investments in Africa's digital sector, particularly in countries like Tanzania, where internet penetration remains low but telecom infrastructure is robust. This focus aims to empower African youth and women, aligning with her emphasis on gender inclusion and democratic values, countering Chinese and Russian influence. Harris's approach is shaped by U.S. concerns about China's extensive investments in African infrastructure and Russia's growing security presence. Her 2023 tour was seen as an effort to counter these influences by offering an alternative model of partnership based on collaboration rather than crises. In 2025, she would likely continue to advocate for fair trade agreements, debt relief, and access to critical minerals, positioning the U.S. as a reliable partner amid global competition, democratic values and human rights. Harris's speeches often emphasize democratic governance and human rights, reflecting U.S. priorities in engaging with African nations. Her 2023 visit to Tanzania highlighted the country's progress in empowering women politically and economically. In 2025, she might push for initiatives like the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit's commitments to democracy and civil society, urging African governments to uphold credible elections and press freedoms. Harris's challenges and perceptions. Harris's vision faces skepticism in Africa due to historical U.S. foreign policy missteps and perceptions of hypocrisy. Many African leaders and citizens, as noted in a 2025 Afrobarometer survey, expressed distrust in Western intentions, viewing U.S. aid as tied to strategic interests like countering China or securing mineral access. Her emphasis on democracy is complicated by the U.S.'s selective engagement with authoritarian regimes, such as Egypt, which received $1.3 billion in military aid despite human rights concerns. Additionally, her limited visits to Africa, only one major tour in 2023, have led to accusations that the continent remains low on her priority list. On X, reactions to Harris's Africa policy are mixed. Some users praise her focus on cultural and economic partnerships, citing her engagement with African youth as a step toward genuine collaboration. Others, however, view her initiatives as a continuation of U.S. hegemony, with hashtags like #AfricaForAfricans criticizing foreign interference. The presence of AI-generated content amplifying Traoré's anti-Western rhetoric further complicates her messaging, as it fuels narratives that frame the U.S. as an imperialist force. Points of collision between Traoré and Harris. The visions of Traoré and Harris collide on several fundamental issues, reflecting divergent priorities and worldviews. Sovereignty versus partnership. Traoré's insistence on African sovereignty directly challenges Harris's model of U.S.-Africa partnerships. While Harris promotes collaboration through initiatives like AGOA and AFRICOM, Traoré views such arrangements as veiled attempts to maintain Western control. His rejection of ECOWAS and expulsion of French forces contrast sharply with Harris's calls for multilateral engagement, as seen in her support for the African Union and U.S.-backed regional frameworks. Economic models. Traoré's push for economic nationalism, including nationalizing mines and exploring a gold-backed currency, clashes with Harris's emphasis on open markets and foreign investment. His reforms aim to retain resource wealth domestically, while Harris's initiatives like Prosper Africa encourage U.S. private sector involvement, which some Africans see as perpetuating exploitative dynamics. Security strategies. Traoré's reliance on internal resilience and non-Western allies like Russia contrasts with Harris's advocacy for U.S.-led counterterrorism efforts. His accusations that Western powers use terrorism to destabilize Africa directly undermine Harris's narrative of cooperative security. For instance, Traoré's claim that, "it's not really terrorism, it's imperialism," frames U.S. and French military presence as part of a broader agenda to plunder African resources. Cultural and ideological narratives. Traoré's revival of African cultural values and Pan-Africanist rhetoric resonates with a generation seeking to reclaim indigenous identity, while Harris's focus on universal democratic values and gender inclusion aligns with Western liberal ideals. This ideological divide is evident in X reactions, where Traoré's supporters frame Harris's initiatives as neo-colonial, and her supporters criticize Traoré's authoritarianism. Geopolitical alignments. Traoré's pivot to Russia and China as strategic partners directly counters Harris's efforts to counterbalance their influence. His appearance with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the 2025 Victory Day parade in Moscow symbolized this shift, drawing criticism from U.S. officials like AFRICOM's General Michael Langley, who accuse Traoré of misusing gold reserves. Harris's push for U.S. investment, meanwhile, is seen by some as an attempt to secure access to critical minerals, fueling suspicions of ulterior motives. Debunking AI fakes and misinformation. The digital landscape, particularly on X, has played a significant role in amplifying Traoré's image while complicating Harris's outreach. AI-generated content, such as deepfake videos and fabricated speeches, has glorified Traoré as a Pan-African hero, often exaggerating his achievements or creating false narratives. For example, a 2024 deepfake video showed Traoré delivering a multilingual speech calling for African unity, garnering millions of views despite being inauthentic. Similarly, claims that Traoré threatened to wipe out Nigeria were debunked by Africa Check, highlighting the absence of credible evidence in official speeches or media reports. These misinformation campaigns, often linked to Pan-Africanist or Russian propaganda efforts, undermine Harris's diplomatic messaging by framing the U.S. as an imperialist threat. A Reddit post in May 2025 warned of an AI-generated UN speech attributed to Traoré, urging users to verify information to combat misinformation. Such content not only bolsters Traoré's cult-like following but also distorts public perceptions of U.S. intentions, making Harris's calls for partnership appear less genuine. X reactions and public sentiment. X has become a battleground for narratives surrounding Traoré and Harris, reflecting polarized views on Africa's future. Posts praising Traoré often use hashtags like #AfricaRising and #HandsOffAfrica, celebrating his anti-Western stance and reforms. A May 2025 post with nearly 1 million followers falsely claimed that U.S. General Langley labeled Traoré a threat to his people, sparking outrage and rallies in Ouagadougou. Conversely, Harris's supporters highlight her 2023 Africa tour, with some users arguing that her focus on youth and women offers a progressive alternative to military rule. However, the prevalence of misinformation on X complicates these narratives. AI-generated content and unverified claims, such as alleged protests against Traoré in France, lack credible evidence and often serve to either glorify or vilify him. Meanwhile, Harris's initiatives are frequently dismissed as Western propaganda by Traoré's supporters, who view her as complicit in U.S. efforts to maintain hegemony. This digital divide underscores the challenge of shaping public opinion in an era of algorithmic populism. Implications for Africa's future. The collision of Traoré's and Harris's visions reflects a broader struggle over Africa's trajectory in 2025. Traoré's model, while inspiring, risks entrenching military rule and alienating traditional allies, potentially destabilizing the Sahel further. His reliance on Russia raises questions about whether he is trading one form of dependency for another, especially as security challenges persist. Harris's approach, conversely, offers economic opportunities but struggles to overcome Africa's historical distrust of U.S. intentions, particularly given the selective application of democratic principles. The AES, under Traoré's influence, could reshape regional dynamics by fostering a bloc that prioritizes African-led solutions. However, its success depends on overcoming internal challenges like insurgency and external pressures from Western powers. Harris's vision, while more inclusive of global partnerships, must address African demands for equitable terms and respect for sovereignty to gain traction. The interplay of these visions will likely influence whether Africa moves toward greater self-reliance or remains entangled in global power rivalries. Conclusion. The contrasting visions of Ibrahim Traoré and Kamala Harris for Africa in 2025 encapsulate a critical moment in the continent's history. Traoré's Pan-Africanist reforms, rooted in sovereignty and anti-imperialism, resonate with a generation seeking to break free from historical exploitation but face challenges of stability and governance. Harris's push for U.S.-Africa partnerships offers economic and security support but struggles against perceptions of neocolonialism. On X, these narratives are amplified and distorted by misinformation, highlighting the power of digital platforms in shaping public discourse. As Africa navigates its path forward, the tension between these visions underscores the need for leaders who can balance sovereignty with strategic collaboration, ensuring that the continent's vast potential benefits its people above all.